Hello everybody, it's jrobi bringing you Game 5 of the World Chess Championship. The world champion Anand is defending against Topalov, and it's been a fairly exciting series so far. A little bit lopsided towards Anand so far, but going into Game 5 there was only 1 point difference between the two players. For those of you that are new to following the World Chess Championship, there's 12 total games, and the way you get points is as follows. For a win you get a full point, for a draw both players will get a half a point, and for a loss you get no points. So going up into this game, Anand was leading 2.5 points to Topalov's 1.5 points because Anand lost the first game when Topalov had the white pieces. Topalov lost the second game when Anand had the white pieces. They tied Game 3, and then in Game 4, of course, which is the last video that I made, Anand was able to just crush Topalov over the board. So there was a lot of discussion going into Game 5 as to what Topalov would bring out, what he'd bring to the table today, and he's opened up with pawn to d4. And O to the MG is what I was thinking in my head, and but Topalov is he's kind of battling between the top two players in the world consistently in terms of his rating. He knows what he's doing, so if he's going to open up again with d4, even though he hasn't been able to defeat Anand over the table with a queen's pawn opening in the last 3 games, you must have something planned, right? So that's what I was hoping when I saw that move that was played. But anyway, let's just dive right into it here. So in response to the queen's pawn opening, Anand pushes his pawn up now to d5, and in fact the next 16 moves are identical to the moves that were played in Game 3. So Topalov must have seen an improvement in his play that he wanted to try out, and Anand is actually letting him do it because there is absolutely no change in the move order here. Queens come off at the same time. The knight captures here on d7 again. The pawn is snagged back up on c4. So pretty much everything is identical. If you want more of an in-depth discussion on these moves, definitely go ahead and check out the Game 3 video. But I'm going to stop here. So why would Anand let Topalov do this? Why would he let him play the exact same moves? Well, as it turns out, Anand also has a change in the line that he wanted to try out, and he actually beats Topalov to the punch, and he pushes his pawn up to h5. So Topalov kind of gets a little bit of a proverbial kick in the chess pieces here, because I don't think that he was planning for this pawn to h5 move, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But if we flip back one move, what was played by Anand in Game 3 was pawn to h6. Now we have to remember that Anand actually drew Game 3 with the black pieces, which is fine. When you're in a chess match with somebody and you're playing black, to get the draw, that's fine. If you get the win, that's awesome. But if you draw, then that means that you didn't lose. You get half a point. You move on to the next game when you get the white pieces. So in Game 3, Anand did draw that game, and in that game he pushed his pawn up to h6. Now this let Topalov kind of bury Anand's bishop here into h7. So Anand totally changes his move order up here, and he pushes his pawn to h5 instead. Basically saying to Topalov, I don't know what you've been planning with your team in terms of this game and this line that we played in Game 3, but I beat you to the punch. I'm putting my different move in right now. And in fact, Topalov was sitting at the table for a number of minutes, and I was able to watch the whole thing go down because I was able to watch the first part of the game live before I had to go to work. And in fact, Anand just got up after a couple of minutes and went and grabbed a drink, refilled his glass of water, and came back. And Topalov was still thinking, and I really don't think that Topalov's team was thinking about pawn to h5 in this position, because it kind of creates a little bit of a weakness on black's side. It looks like a weakness on black's side, and basically that weakness revolves around knight to e2, which Topalov saw and he played. Knight to e2, of course, is threatening knight to f4, which is attacking the bishop and going to be attacking the pawn on h5. Now, if that bishop comes off the table, Anand's pawn structure on his king side gets a little bit weak because he has to take back with the f pawn. Alternatively, if that bishop goes into h7, that pawn on h5 is hanging. So it looks like it creates some weakness in the black position. And but the fundamental thing that I thought when I saw this move was that now Topalov was playing Anand's game. Now Anand surely, if Anand's team came up with this alternative move in this position, considered that this supposed weakness would become apparent, and Topalov would probably jump all over that. But Topalov is now playing into Anand's strategy at this point, because whatever pet move that he came up with in his line with his team, we'll never know unless he says in an interview, because he didn't get a chance to play it. The first person to bust out of the line move order from Game 3 was Anand. So I thought that was really interesting. So to prevent the knight from coming into f4 here, Anand swings his bishop now into d6. So it's carving along that dark square diagonal. For the short term, it's preventing that knight from leaping into f4 to attack that light square bishop. From here, Topalov responds now bishop over to e3. So basically the goal is he's going to play his bishop up to f4. He's going to try to trade those dark square bishops off, which is going to give his knight that nice square now on f4. But we should notice a couple things about this bishop maneuver. First of all, this bishop was kind of pressurizing the g7 square, kind of marrying down this rook to protect that pawn. Now this rook is freed up, however, because the bishop is no longer along that dark square diagonal. So Topalov has to it's like a little bit of a give and take. I'm going to move my bishop to try to get my plan going, but in the process, I'm going to give you the ability to move that g-rook now. So that was interesting, the position. From here now, Anand jumps his knight down into e5, attacking the light square bishop, but he's also threatening to play knight to d3 if that light square bishop isn't defending that square here on d3, forking the king and the rook. Now from here, Topalov swings his knight up now to f4, attacking the light square bishop, also giving another defender here to the d3 square, but Anand doesn't have to worry about him capturing that light square bishop right away, because he has a nice little resource here, rook over to c8. And rook over to c8, of course, now we have two attackers on this piece here, so Anand is threatening to win a piece. So in reply to that, Topalov swings his bishop back to b3, but Anand's rook is still attacking that rook on c1, so he comes down and he takes that. Topalov recaptures with his bishop, and from here Anand plays his king up now to e7, so he's opening up access for his rook. From this position, Topalov continues king up to e2, opening up access for his rook, and Anand now swings his rook over to c8, so he's attacking that dark square bishop on c1. Of course, the bishop is defended by Topalov's rook. So Topalov continues in this position now. He brings up his dark square bishop to d2, and Anand pushes his pawn up now to f6. And this is kind of a preemptive move to protect this g7 pawn, just in case this dark square bishop ever were to get along this dark square diagonal from this position again. Play continues now. Topalov does come in and he captures that bishop. Anand recaptures with his knight, so there is no damage to the pawn structure, and from here now Topalov pushes his pawn up to g3. From this position, Anand plays knight over now to e5. Topalov continues, he pushes the pawn up to f4, attacking that knight. Anand retreats that knight now to c6, but now he's threatening, of course, hitting the knight here on d4, which would fork the king and the bishop. So Topalov continues now, bishop up now to c3. Now this move does stop that fork from happening, but I want to draw back to the whole point that Anand's play is kind of dictated the flow of this game ever since he played that pawn to h5 move. So once again, whatever pet move Topalov came up with in the line, he wasn't able to use, and now he's been kind of reacting and having to counter-react to Anand's play. And if we take a look at the position, there's really not a lot of attacking capabilities here. Topalov is a very attacking style player, and he doesn't have a lot of openings in this position, so Anand's doing a really good job of shutting him down and keeping the position very equal. So from this position now, Anand swings his bishop down now to b4, so he wants to trade off some more material. Of course, the bishop has to protect this square here on d4 from the fork, so Topalov has to take that bishop. Anand recaptures, and now Topalov swings his rook over now to d1. So he does have the d file, Anand has the c file, but once again, there's really not a lot of action going on here in terms of weak points in the position that either player can go for. So from this position now, Anand plays his knight over to c6, once again threatening to hit that potential check square on d4 if he can get these rooks off the table, and Topalov brings his rook up now to d2. From this position, Anand thrusts his g-pawn forward now to g5, attacking the pawns, and Topalov actually doesn't worry about that right away. Instead, he moves his king to f2, and this is basically bringing his king closer to the pawns where some action might take place, but it's also taking that king off of that annoying check square there on d4. From here, Anand continues now pushing the pawn forward. He doesn't want to take the pawns off the table just yet, and from here, Topalov brings his rook over to c2, so he's pinning that knight temporarily down to the rook on c8. Anand gets out of the pin, plays his rook over to d8, and now Topalov brings his king closer to the center of the board to e3. So he's keeping that king really close to the pawns, maybe hoping for some kind of pawn break at some point, but it's difficult to do so in this position. There really is no weak points in this position. So from here now, Anand brings his rook to d6. Topalov continues with his rook up now to c5. He's attacking the pawn on h5. Anand responds pawns. Now knight over down to b4. Now this, of course, is putting two attackers on the d3 square, and if that check is allowed to happen, the bishop on b3 falls. So to prevent that from happening, Topalov hits a check himself. King goes over to d8, attacking the rook, and now Topalov brings that rook down to c3 to prevent that check from taking place and losing his bishop on b3. Play continues now, king to e7, and now at this point Topalov takes a shot into the position, so he's going to try to dictate play a little bit. He thrusts his e-pawn up to e5. That's attacking the rook on d6, and it's also attacking the pawn here on f6. Anand retreats his rook, and from here Topalov takes, and when Anand recaptures this king, Topalov retreats his king to the e2 square, taking it off of this annoying check square here that the knight has on d5. From this position now, Anand continues knight up now to c6, once again threatening to check the king, liquidate more material off the table, and Topalov plays king down now to e1 to remove himself from that check. Anand continues placing his knight there anyway. At this point in the game, getting any material off the table, as long as it's in a safe manner, is good for Anand. But Topalov doesn't want to lose any of his attacking pieces because he is trying to play for the win. He hasn't won in the last 3 games. So he swings his bishop down now to d1, and from here Anand plays pawn up now to a5. Topalov continues rook up now to c5, attacking both of these undefended pawns, but Anand continues now with knight to f5, and basically this is attacking the foundation of White's pawn structure here. So Topalov can't let that happen, because if this foundation pawn here on g3 falls, these pawns on the f and h file are going to be extremely weak and easy for Anand to attack and munch up. And on top of that, Topalov would have to face a past protected g pawn. So he definitely can't let that happen. So he swings his rook back to c3 to defend that pawn on g3, at which point Anand once again places his knight now onto d4. Topalov attacks those pawns again, and Anand repeats the position, placing the knight back onto f5. Topalov brings the rook down to c3, and the game ends in a draw. So Topalov didn't get a win again with the white pieces, so he hasn't beaten Anand in the last 4 games. So he's going to be under a tremendous amount of pressure tomorrow going into game 6. He's only 1 point back still, so if he can get a draw tomorrow, he's still got good fighting chances. If he drops the game tomorrow and loses to Anand with the black pieces, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. I think it's going to be hard to come back from a 2-point spread against the best chess player in the world and the current world chess champion. But we'll find out what happens tomorrow. So take care. Hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time.